And I come to you as an investor for 30 years, consulting as many years, coaching businesses, 15 years, businesses. And I started a mentoring program about 5 years ago that's really been an interesting discovery to be able to connect with trusted leaders, trusted advisors, and people that are doing some different things. And I've started a $1 million business challenge that I'm experimenting with. And so my question to myself is, what can I learn from this? And it turns out I can learn a lot and unlearn a lot. So it's a very interesting perspective of what you brought since that session. And you mentioned that it seems like a long time ago. Since that session, it seems like I've spiraled in multiple areas of success, of high performance. So love to be able to have a discussion about that. My question to everybody else is, what did you glean? What did you learn from this? And what can I learn from you as a result of this? Realize in order to be a high-performing company, they have to be able to value the employees and care for them. So that is shifting quite a bit. The ones that are command and control companies are going to not perform as well because they're driving their people out. The quiet quitting, the quiet firing, whatever the case of that might be. The companies that do succeed are still going to focus on money, but they're starting to realize in order to get more money, they can expand the capabilities of the employees, of the people themselves. You can have it. I always go to the analogy of a team. You can have a team of individuals that are high performing, always are going to be beaten by an average team of a cohesive group. They always work better. And I think businesses realize that what they're struggling with is how to get there. And I think Jacinta's, the speaker's approach is one of the approaches to bring some light to this. But what I'm finding is that her approach is very myopic. She's not looking at the whole aspect. And the whole aspect, maybe let me give you a macro level or a higher level, is that I think she's approaching with the people that are burnout, that are tired out, they're having a difficult time, especially because of the pandemic. That brought it out a lot more. But what I'm starting to think is that might be the bottom aspect of the organizational aspect. So if we take the 80-20 rule, the 80-20 rule says you're going to have the 20% that are going to do the majority of the work. So in an environment, a working environment, I go a little bit more into that, thinking it's 20-60-20. 20% is high performing, 60% are just getting along, and the 20% are burnout or turnover or having a difficult time. She's addressing the bottom 20% in my mind to give it some clarity. So the key is, how do you get that 20% at the bottom to the high 20% in the organization? Now, this applies to the individual, to a team and organization, which is one of the things you talked about. And so if you take an individual, how do you get them, if they're burnt out, to a high-performing person? Great question. How do you take a team that is maybe burnt out, like Margaret said? They're not really, there's something going on that we can't figure it out. That we put them in that burnout stage, maybe. And so how do you get them to a higher level, at least just the next level where they're performing better? Maybe they're not at the top 20% of high performance, because that would be exceptional. The top 20%, I think of Apple, I think of Google, I think of Amazon. They really are the trillion-dollar companies, and even they have some initiatives within that. So if we take a 20-60-20 rule, her approach for the burnout is, well, let's get them out of that state. If they probably burnt out because of work overload, all those values conflicts, all those things. If we could summarize all of that, not so much as burnout, that's a one word, but it's a level of frustration. As Elon Musk says, fine, go be frustrated somewhere else. You come to work with me. So the key here is he's saying to those people that lower 20%, get out. I got my top 20 and I got my 60%. we're going to run this company the way it should be run. And if you can't do it on your own, get out of burnout or whatever that is into at least performing well, then I don't want you. I don't need you. Go find it somewhere else or go find a coach. So that's what I'm starting to realize. Everybody has a role in this. The question is how much they're able or willing to participate and invest. Now, the individual, the leadership, and also the organization. So everybody has a vested interest. The key is how much they're going to participate and how much clarity they have about what the issue is. How do you handle frustration? Here's the insight that I've gotten since I've understood the session, is that frustration is the first step in a 4-stage process to flow cycle. And I thought, now that's interesting. You mean if I'm frustrated, if I take myself as an individual, I'm frustrated in a particular aspect, and I've got many frustrations, I'm thinking, I'm not able to do this. I'm frustrated. The second stage to frustration is engagement, or to make an effort. The third stage is once you make enough effort, enough practice, enough participation, you do get to a state of flow, which everything's going well, and participate. And I'm thinking, now, could that be the bottom 20, the middle 60, and the top 20? And I'm thinking that might be the case, but I'll come back to that to take some more thought. And the fourth stage is recovered. So if I take it from a sports performance aspect, and I don't know how many of you are athletes or performed, when I was running marathons, I went through a level of frustration. Practicing, getting to it, trying to do it, doing all these things, not good enough, and all those things, frustration. And then the day of the event, I actually performed. I got out there. And most of the time I did okay. And I don't think I ever got to the state of flow, but occasionally the state of flow might be when I finally cross the line. There's a sense of euphoria. And then afterwards is, of course, the recovery. Walking is horrific. It's painful. And yet we have to walk to recover from that. So are those the 4 stages if we do the analogy from sports to business? I'm not quite sure, but I'm starting to put some things together. Now, that's a question I ask myself too, because that's an interesting question. How do we shift to the highest level? And what's interesting is you can be at the highest level and you can't stay at that high level for long. Just it's too much. So there's a cyclical effect to that. So the key is, in my mind, I thought, well, who should I focus on? Should I focus on the burnout people? Should I focus in the middle that are doing well? Or should I focus on the high performance? And I don't know the answer to that. Obviously, it's a function of who I can connect with. What I'm finding is this, that if you study the high performance people, then you can come up with the triggers to allow that 60% that are just getting by to get to a higher level. Maybe you could also help the lower 20. So what are the 20% high level people doing? What are their triggers? Amazingly, it's really something that's related to coaching. Clear goals, deep involvement, serious concentration, good communication, familiarity, a sense of risk, sense of control, close listening, always saying yes, creativity. I'm thinking, this is coaching. This is the triggers that high performance athletes, teams, organizations are using. And now it could be because they can afford it. Obviously, it takes resources. You got to have the right amount of time, the right amount of money, investments. That's why the Googles, the Apples, the Facebooks, the Amazons are right up there because they have the resources. So what if you can take those triggers and apply it to the 60% and perhaps to the bottom 20% because it may be more difficult. They may not have the resources at that level. But in the middle area, those are the ones that perhaps a company has the biggest potential to return. So what if you get that 60% to the top 60%? all of a sudden you have the dynamics is changing. One of the things that I noticed in this coming together, that the flow model is very similar to the slow model. The slow model, she's talking about the burnout and applies to the bottom 20%. The flow model, which is very, very similar to what we're talking about, applies to the high 20%. So if we could take that and be able to apply it, and let me explain what flow means. And I put on the chat box a model that I put together, is this. There's 4 stages to that. There's motivation. It's high motivated to excel. Then there's also learning, that you learn the skill sets, you learn the wherewithal. Then out of that comes creativity. You create something. They're incented to create. There's a certain level of risk of failure, but not so much that it prevents it. But that kind of risk of failure is also kind of a dopamine effect to succeed. And the 4th one is flow itself, which flow is more mindfulness, being able to meditate, being able to visualize. So those 4 stages, when I put it together, I thought, oh, this is very interesting. And also going from slow to flow, I thought in the middle is focus. So if I took that model of 20-60-20, the slow would be in the bottom 20, the focus would be in the middle 60, that they're focusing on getting results, and the flow would be in the top 20%. So how do you get from that? Well, maybe as Richard, you said, and also Susan, maybe focus on the middle 60 because that's the majority, and get them to a higher level. And I think it all depends on the organization, because I think it does take some resources, obviously an investment in coaching. If we could take a hypothetical environment where a company that has no coaches and a company that coaches tremendously their organization, either internally or externally, the company that coaches their organization is going to be into a flow state much more often, potentially. I think on paper, it seems that would be the case based on our experience. And we're biased because we're coaches. We're thinking we can help them get there because we can have that clarity to be able to do the high performance. So in the global economy, there's $4 trillion is spent in being able to witness flow states. And I'm talking about possibly athletes, events. We go to a concert. We want to watch somebody that's in a flow state, and we're willing to pay money for that. 1/16 of the global economy to pay for that. So there's money into that. So we really like and recognize high performance, a flow state. So there's a big economy there. So what if we can focus, and I'm thinking as coaches, what if we just focus on the top 20% and help them get to the higher level? Actually, the top, they get from the top 20% to the 20% of the 20%, which is even a higher level. If we know the skills, and they would probably have the resources, the time and the money and the commitment to be able to hire us. And that could be executive coaching, but it could also be, I think, more and more team coaching. So that's a growth opportunity for us as coaches, where we can really focus on the top level and, of course, the middle level as well, too. At the bottom level, we're talking about perhaps people don't have the resources or the time, or they know they should use coaches, but they're not going to because they're strapped for resources and money. So the thought is that as a global growth space, coaching is going to become more and more important when the community, the businesses realize that they can produce more, obtain more with the same or less people, and be able to exponentially grow through coaching.